like there ain't no relief in this dying game and things like that, where I was in a pretty dark spot there. So it felt like I was about to write a bunch of very lonely, sad songs,
First off, I just really loved the record.
Well, thank you.
It's beautiful songs on it, but I think in order to talk about it, we have to talk about your friend, Carl.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for people who are listening to this, who don't know the story at all, how would you feel about telling me a little bit about your friend, Carl?
Yeah, so, Carl I met when I was like 25 years old.
What was his full name?
Carl Barham.
Mm-hmm.
We called him Horse. He was one of those beautiful people that came into my life because of this thing that I got to do, which was playing a band and travel around, and you meet people that you otherwise wouldn't have come across in just sort of 9 to 5. I've sort of, that's what I've realized anyways. And so Carl, we met him in England. We needed a guy who could work for cheap to do sound, and he was recommended to us by our other friend who was sort of tour managing us, and he was also part of this group of British friends that Alexis developed that became lifelong friends of ours. There was like there was a band called Johnny Truant, and John and Carl did sound for Truant, and it was like this, we brought them on tour after that. And then Carl joined the family working for the band and then working for me. And I like to keep my guys around as long as possible. So most of my crew have been with me forever, because it's my family. So long story long, Carl becomes one of the closest people in my life. And beyond working for me on the road, we started making records together. And yeah, it's just basically like the closest thing you can have to a brother, right? And I'm lucky that I've got a lot of people like that in my life, again, because of this thing that I do. And then, in 2019, in September, right before, a week before my last record was going to come out, that we had made together, he passed away tragically, and that's Carl.
I'm so sorry for you. I mean, I think the first time we really got to talk, we talked a little bit about him. And it's only now, I'm even sitting here now realizing how fresh that must have been for you.
Yeah, I think about that conversation you and I had a lot because, I had not really wanted to do any of that once all that happened. And so you were really one of the only people I talked to about even that record.
Yeah.
And then it was like weeks after, and and then I went on that tour, and then the world kind of stopped. Yeah. So that conversation you and I had was one of those like rare moments in those early days of it where I just sort of talked about it.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, I think for people who don't know what it's like to tour and don't know what it's like to be in a band and part of like a touring group, they don't understand how deep those relationships can really be. Like, this is not losing a coworker. This is not losing even a friend.
No, it's way beyond that. And it is a very strange way to live, and only certain people are sort of wired to do it.
Yeah.
And then when you meet those people and you actually get to do it and spend a lifetime what feels like with these people, it's almost you don't even really have the words to describe the bond you create.
Yeah. And it's an experience of like, I've talked to friends of mine who like, and not to speak for them, but my friend Jay Smith was lost. He was on the road with Matt Mays, and they lost him on the. He passed away while he was on the road with Matt Mays. There's something about like that brotherhood of being on the road with people, and then like the band also losing their friend on the road. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like,
it's. I think for everybody that was involved, it was just this like. I mean, it stopped time, and it really did. It really stopped time in that. With that group of people too. Like it's so strange that the pandemic would follow like months later.
Yeah.
But it really just separated all of us too. And then we went into this like grieving period. Well, the pandemic was starting. It was just so very isolating. you know?
Did you feel any, I mean, so it's a beautiful record, and there's a lot of it about him, or at least like I infer to be about him. Meant to Be is, I think, about him.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of it is rooted, like I think it's just about loss as a whole.
Yeah.
And trying to move through that, you know, and find your way to the other side of it. But yes, so much of it is informed by losing Carl, because it's the deepest experience I've ever had to go through with regarding grief, you know, and me being the way I am and writing about my feelings. It was like a real, just sort of, it was a really interesting process to go through, because you know, how do you write about something like that elegantly and still be as honest as possible, you know?
When did you know you were ready to start writing about it?
Well, I oddly enough, I wrote the last song on the record, or at least started to write it in February of 2020 while I was out. I think when we spoke, I had said how like I had just like kind of gotten rid of my band and was going to just try to soldier on playing quietly by myself.
Yeah.
And in those were very lonely months or weeks going across Europe. And I started to write Begin Again then, because I think I was in such a state emotionally where I was like, I need to start writing my thoughts down about what I'm feeling, you know, because that's just how I always have been, right? I get out of my own head by writing a line down on my phone or on a book, and then trying to put it to music, and it just sort of is my process of working through things. But then the pandemic started, and there was a whole another sort of convoluted emotional phase I was going through there. But I think it wasn't until really like right before my 40th birthday, which was also is like the 1 year anniversary of Carl passing, right?
He passed on your birthday?
He passed September 23rd, 2019. My birthday is September 29th. So it's like I was turning 40 and I was thinking about this, and I was going through some other things personally, and it was just like perfectly, I've said this before, it was like a tailor-made midlife crisis. It really was. And
I don't mean to laugh.
no, it's because I laugh at it, because I think, wow, I'd really somehow put myself into, just like write it all down, and there it is, you know, in the dictionary. So it was really just a couple of like, it was around there where I just was like, okay, I need to focus this energy elsewhere.
Well, that makes sense, because there's a lyric I wanted to ask you about, which was, and then the morning came and the sun started rising, but I was missing my friend.
Yeah.
So how do I carry on?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, like, when I was writing that song, that's where I was with it, you know, like still in a very, a place of, unbelief. Like I couldn't work out how this is what had happened still, you know? So I was really questioning. That song is like, I'm trying to eulogize Horst, but I think I'm also questioning my, faith in whatever you want to put faith into, and all my Catholic upbringing and all of this stuff that I'm putting into a song that's just sort of, and just total disbelief that it had happened, you know? And asking myself, how do I get through it?
I know this is a slightly unpunk thing to talk about, but did you, through going through this loss, find some faith or rediscover some faith you might have lost? Or
no.
Okay.
I mean, I found faith in myself, and I found faith in the things I believe in, but I've always sort of tiptoed around and used religious imagery and things like that. And I have songs questioning it all the time, and it's because I was born and raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school.
Mass every Sunday.
I went to school. We went to church during school. I learned all. Read the Bible, learned world religion, learned.
Real deal.
I was in Catholic school. Baptized, all that stuff.
Eucharist, the whole thing.
Graduated and sort of had experiences during high school where I started to realize I really liked being my own person and coming to things on my own terms. And I had some good teachers too that also like allowed me to go that route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
still, you can't unlearn a lot of that. And I know that parts of the way I am are because I was raised a certain way. And I'm not saying that my parents weren't deeply religious. This is not like
No, it was a cultural thing.
it
and
was
it's a,
just
you know,
what I did.
yeah,
My
yeah.
dad was, you know,
Yeah.
that was a good place for me to, like I said, sort of like, I like to have these big unanswerable questions that I pine over in my head and then just try to write like a little pretty simple song about it. And so that's what Meant to Be became, was like, it wasn't just going to, because like, again, these songs are rooted in certain specific things that happened in my life, but that's not where I want the song to lie, right? I want it to start there and then put it in a way that can just sort of like create some sort of discussion, you know, resonate with how someone else.
Do you get any answers? Like just like on the record, just like, how do I carry on? How do I heal? Like, how am I supposed to love again after this big insurmountable loss?
Yeah.
Did you get any answers?
Yeah, I think you just have to move forward. It's like, I think part of what made me really feel comfortable writing about all of this was, I mean, a few things. I guess this is how I always have been, and people seem to connect with it, so I never feel like I need to do anything right any other way.
What do you mean? Like, you've always written about the things you've gone
like
through.
this is just like when I put out the first record, and it was basically just a bunch of journal entries to like 6.5 minute long acoustic songs.
Yeah, yeah.
And a bunch of people sort of took that and ran with it. I've always sort of felt supported in this way of writing. So that was one thing. But I think the other real revelation was realizing that the things I was going through were absolutely not singular to me and my friends. Yeah. I was experiencing the grief of my friend who I considered a brother. I was experiencing, you know, the loss of love in a way. I was experiencing the sort of loss of what I sort of assumed my identity was just this person who goes out and makes music and tours, and then that was not there. Yeah. So all I was doing was living, and then I thought, okay, well, I can write about this. Like, this is not just for me, but this is just something I can do, you know? This is something I can do that can help me get through a lot of this. Yeah. That's sort of how I found the healing and found my way back to the light and moving forward was by writing about it.
And what else can you do? There's
well,
nothing.
Exactly.
Like, I remember, like, I went through a pretty significant loss in my early 20s. And I remember turning down this intersection in St. John's. And I just remember, like, it sounds so stupid, but I remember realizing that, like, all these people are going to work. They don't know what I'm going through.
Absolutely.
They don't know what I'm going through. And they're continuing their lives, and the sun's still coming up. Like, I have no other option.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that was just a real moment there where you know, you've heard about this kind of state of being your whole life.
Yeah.
You're going to lose people. It's going to destroy you.
Yeah.
You don't know when it's coming.
Yeah.
But you do know it's coming.
Yeah.
Whether it's you doing it to other people or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like one of the only truths we really know. It's like, don't you worry, right? But then it happens and you find yourself in a state that you feel like you'll never be able to get out of, right? And then it just starts to happen.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like I can just write a document that represents like where I am as a human being right now in this stage of my life. And then you just hope that it can grow wings and resonate with somebody else.
The difference is, Dallas, that I'm curious about, if you want to talk about it, is that my understanding is Carl, the friend that you lost, Horst. Why did you call him Horst, by the way?
Do you really want the story? It's great, I think. It's just,
why wouldn't I? I'm
okay.
Here. I got nowhere to be.
We were on tour in the early aughts, I guess. And I think we were in Austria, if I can remember exactly where we were. And Carl referred to George as Horst.
George from Alexis on Fire.
George from Alexis Horst, like, you know, hey, Horst, can you pass me that thing? And George was like, why are you calling me a horse? Like, what is that? Don't call me Horst. And Carl's response was literally just matter of fact, horses are like majestic. Why would you not want to be called Horst? And George was like, you're right. Okay. And then from that moment on, everybody in the group started referring to each other as horse instead of like pal or man. It was like, and then it kind of became a verb. You know, Horst, can you horse me over that?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
And so over time, we all just like would us and the Brits would refer to each other as Horse, but then because Carl sort of originated the term, he really truly became Horse. So there you go.
There's that nice moment on the record where there's like a little bit of a cheers to
Horse.
Cheers to Horse.
Yeah.
The difference between what we talked about before and what I think you had to deal with here is that my understanding is that Carl engineered your records, right? Like
yeah.
And so you had to go in, your records up to this point, and so you had to go in and make this record in some ways about grief, about loss, but inspired by the loss of your friend.
Yes.
You had to also go into the studio probably for one of the first times in a long time without him.
Yes, very much so. We'd all actually worked with Carl too. We all knew Carl very well. You know, like the band who played on the record was who played on the Ben Rogers record that Carl and I produced. Mm-hmm. So me and Carl had worked with them in the studio, met them forever ago. They're Matt Kelly's best pals. Matt and I, who had like really worked through the songs together.
Matt, who's in City and Color and Alexis on
Yes,
Fire.
Matt Kelly, who co-produced the record with me. Matt was there from the inception of so many of the songs, but also I didn't have to explain to Matt what I was writing about. Matt lived it with me. Matt was right beside me when it happened, you know? So, and then Darren and Jill had worked with Carl before. They've known Carl forever because I've known Carl forever, and I've known Darren and Jill forever. So when we went in to make that record, there was no explaining what we were there to accomplish. Everybody was on board, knew what we were going to be sort of like digging into emotionally, what I was.
Was it emotional to do? Was it hard to do? Or could you kind of turn off and...
Yeah, there were definitely moments that were very difficult because it was like how you just explained it. It was like, we're making a record, which all of us know how to do. It's all most of us have ever done. But so many of these songs were about our friend who we used to make records with, and he's not here. And he was there in such spirit. Do you know what I mean? But that made it difficult at times because you just wished he was there.
Yeah.
You know?
The other part that seems incredibly difficult is you went to Australia and performed some of this music.
Yeah.
Australia is, if I'm not mistaken, where Carl died. It was a scuba diving accident in Australia. So not only had you had to make this record, I mean, I'm getting filled up thinking about it, to be honest with you. Like, not only did you have to make this record about your buddy that he would have made with you, but he wasn't there, but then you have to go to, I don't want to say the scene of the crime, but like, like where all this tragedy unfolded and return to it and sing about it.
It was heavy.
Yeah, man.
But it was beautiful.
Yeah?
It really was.
What do you remember about it?
Well, I think we were all, because most of the people that came with me this time were there when it happened.
Okay.
All the most of the crew is the same. The only people that weren't there were still people that knew Horse, you know, and knew the whole ins and outs of what had gone on, and it was strange. I don't know if we did this on purpose. Maybe we kind of did, but like I did a City and Color tour and then we did an Alexis tour. But we finished the City and Color tour up in Brisbane, which is where it happened.
Yeah. And
then started the Alexis tour there. And I think we all just really leaned into it. We went back to the small town. We had lunch where Horse had breakfast for the last time. We went to the water. We went and sat in it, you know, because that's also part of, I think, moving forward. It's like there was no part of me that was not going to go back to Australia because I had had so many beautiful moments there, and a lot of them with Horse. So to avoid it is to do nothing of service for yourself, right? And that's what I learned by making the record, you know, like the record it's how I grieved, you know, it's how I healed was to write about it. And to be singing meant to be out there. Like I was opening the shows with it. I was like, let's go, right? Like we're gonna, again, like I wrote this song this is a eulogy for my friend, you know? And what was really beautiful was to play it and we were playing this traveling festival, so our set time was kind of earlier in the day, so you could see the crowd.
Yeah.
And I would, every time we'd play it, I could see somebody having a moment with it. Like whether they were feeling for me or whether they had just gone through it, or it was like, okay, this is what you do, you know, like, cause I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's the thing about that's the thing about albums about grief and songs about grief. And you don't really understand it until you've gone through it, is that, and you hit the nail on the head earlier, is people don't need to write albums in a grand way about grief. If you write about an experience that you went through that was informed by grief and loss, people like me or people who have gone through shit like that will feel it in our own lives.
Yeah.
It'll just happen.
I think that's good.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I had somebody tell me yesterday that had heard the record. They were like, she was getting mad at me in a way, but it was jokingly. She was like, man, this record, it's like in my head. She's like, I don't talk about my feelings. I never talk about my feelings. But you're saying things I'm thinking about. And I'm like, okay, well, that's good. Maybe this will help, you know? And I'll tell you what made me feel really good about that was, I don't know if you've read any of it or listened to any of it. I don't know what you say anymore when you listen to a book.
Yeah, you can say Reddit. Or, yes, I still say Reddit.
I ordered a book and I was waiting for it to arrive, so I listened to it first. Mm-hmm. But Nick Cave has this book, Faith, Hope, and Carnage, where it's him and his friend who's a writer, just having, it's based on these long form conversations they would have over the pandemic. Some of them emails, some of them phone conversations, and they like transcribed it into a book. And so much of it is about grief and Nick dealing with the loss of his sons and now sons, and finding that place to create and to write about it because he realized he could, and he had a voice to do it. And he started to like just discover how sometimes when you're going through it, it feels like the words haven't even been invented yet to describe how you're feeling, you know, and how so many people have a hard time just getting out what they're feeling. And so listening to that too was like, okay, yeah, this is okay to do. You know, this is good to do.
Yeah, it's important to do. You got to do it. Mm-hmm. Has his family heard it? Has Carl's family heard it?
Yeah, I got a message from his sister about Meant to Be, and she said it was, you know, I don't know how you say.
Yeah, she
right?
liked it, you know.
It's like the words aren't there, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we have it, right?
Yeah.
In addition to the loss of your buddy, and I don't know the specifics, but you just told me you've gone through a bunch of shit, like a certifiable midlife crisis, an all-timer midlife crisis. All right, do you feel like a different person now? How are you a different person now?
Well, I think going through it all and really deciding to kind of, I guess, dig in and do some self-inventory. Like I did find a lot of things I was holding on to, and maybe just ultimately I do think I found a new version of myself, you know? I think I found some way to be proud of myself, which I think changed my attitude towards writing, and I think it also allowed me to go sort of head over heels into it and make the Alexis record at the exact same time, you know, where I think I found that instead of going the one way that I could have gone,
the darkness.
Yeah, I chose the other way, and I do feel different, you know, and not that I didn't really like the person I was before it, but you know, I do feel like I learned some things and can apply them to the rest of my time here.
That feeling about self-pride, self-compassion, like even if you're happy with who you were before, that can change it all.
Yeah,
I find it can change it all. I mean, I love the record so much.
Thanks, man.
I really love listening to it, and I didn't, you know, I loved the parts that I felt like I was hearing you talk about your friend. I love the parts that it made me reflect on my own sort of process. I loved the music. I loved the melodies. You know,
I really love how it sounds. Like I'm really proud of the band and just like capturing it. Because again, it was heavy. Like you did allude to it. Like it was heavy, and I was asking these people to come along with me on this pretty, what was going to be an emotional time, you know. And they, like I said, they'd all lived their own versions of that specific thing for sure.
Yeah.
and had all been kind of going through their own versions of the pandemic and life changing the way it did for a lot of people. But I'm really proud of us. I think we made just like a really beautiful sounding record too. You know, it sounds alive. It sounds
joyful.
Yeah, I think it sounds the way I was sort of hoping to feel by the time I was finished, you know?
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, man.
Dallas Green was my guest. City in Color, his new album, The Love That Held Me Near, is out everywhere March 31st. He's also heading out on tour. For more information, go to cityincolor.com.